Hi, everybody. Brad Truax here from Eastman's Woodlands and Wildlife Committee. And today we're going to talk about black cherry trees. Black cherry trees are beautiful, they're valuable for their wood, and they're very valuable for wildlife. At the bottom, you see a beautiful black cherry in blossom. So it's almost winter. Why are we talking about black cherry trees now? Well, it's actually stick season. That's the time when all the deciduous trees have lost their leaves and before it snows. And that leaves a landscape of mainly bare branches and tree trunks. And it happens to be that one of the most readily identifiable trees in this type of environment is the black cherry tree. And that's because it has a very distinctive bark that makes it easy to identify. So we were out in the forest yesterday. Actually, you can see it snowed a little bit since we were out there, but we were able to identify a very nice black cherry tree. And that reminded us that we haven't done a formal presentation on the black cherry. So again, black cherry is a very cold hardy tree. It is present at Eastman, but it's a bit less common than most of the other deciduous trees. Actually, somewhere between 2 and 6% of the trees at Eastman are black cherries, depending on where you're located. And they can be 60 to 80 feet tall, but some have been known to grow as high as 125 feet tall. They could be 1 to 3 feet in diameter, and the canopy spread is 30 to 60 feet. So they can be pretty good sized trees. And the very hard reddish wood is very highly valued for furniture, for paneling, for scientific and professional instruments, for veneers, handles, interior trim, even for toys. And black cherries serve as a very valuable food source for many wildlife species. That's our primary interest in the black cherry. So it's easy to identify black cherries. There are several things that help us identify a black cherry tree. The branch pattern or bud pattern is alternating. The leaf pattern is simple. The bark is the most distinctive feature of black cherry. It looks like burnt cornflakes. We'll show you some pictures of that in a minute. And the blossoms are small, white, and are arranged in terminal spikes. And the fruit, obviously, are black cherries. So again, the branches and buds have an alternating pattern. That's as opposed to the opposite pattern that we might see with maples and ash trees. And the bark of the black cherry is very scaly and fissured, and many people say it resembles burnt cornflakes. So we often use the mnemonic BC, black cherry, burnt cornflakes. And there's an underbark that actually is somewhat of a bright orange brown. We'll show you a picture of that in a minute as well. The leaves are oblong, they're finely serrated, they have a long pointed tip and a tapering base. And on the underside of the black cherry leaf, there are these tiny rusty colored hairs. And we'll show you a picture of those as well. It's very pathognomonic of black cherry. And in the spring, the leaves have a pair of brightly colored stipules. These are outgrowths on either side of the leaf stalk. And the edible fruit ripens in July and August, and then the green cherries start to turn red and then purple black at maturity during the fall. And the flowers have very sweet smell, but the leaves and the twigs have a bitter almond like smell. So here's that very distinctive bark that we talked about. So again, you can see that it's scaly, it's fissured, and most people say it resembles burnt cornflakes. Others say it resembles burnt potato chips. But the mnemonic we use is BC, black cherry, burnt cornflakes. And again, if you look, if there's a spot where the bark is peeled off, the underbark has this bright orange color. So you can may see that as well. The black cherry leaves, again, are simple. They're oblong. They almost football shaped like this one. They're finely serrated. They have a long pointed tip and a tapering base. And I mentioned those fine rusty hairs on the underside. I'll show you a picture of those. You don't see them in this picture. But then in the spring, the leaves have this brightly colored pair of stipules or nectaries. which are located, they're outgrowths basically on the either side of the leaf stalk. So again, here's the underside. So once again, the top of the cherry leaves are kind of a bright green. The bottom is kind of a dull underside. But if you look here, you can see right near the base along this midriff, there are these rusty colored hairs, very characteristic. You see it is in each of these. They only go up maybe a third of the way of the leaf. But again, it's very characteristic, and there are very few other leaf species that would look like this. And by fall, you're likely to see lots of holes in the leaves of the black cherry. And that's because a whole ton of caterpillars love black cherry trees. So the black cherry blossoms come out in the spring. The flowers are small, they're white, they're arranged in these terminal spikes of about 5 inches long that hang downward. And the black cherries themselves, the edible fruit, ripens in July and August. And each cherry is about 3/8 to about half an inch in diameter. And they have a single round seed inside. And the green cherries turn red, then purple black at maturity. I like this photo because it really shows all stages of ripening of the cherries. Here you see a green one, another green one, then you see some that are red, and then finally, the ones that are most ripe are the ones that are actually black, giving the name black cherry. And the black cherries actually make good wines, jams, and jellies. Black cherry, similar to some of the other trees we've talked about, does produce its fruits in a cyclical pattern. So black cherries do have mast years every couple years, meaning that in some years they'll produce a lot more black cherries than in other years. Black cherry trees tend to prefer somewhat moist soil. They require a little bit of shade for their seeds to first germinate, but then they're really shade intolerant. And they really need full sunlight in order for those seedlings to be able to survive. So they're really a shade intolerant species, and they're relatively fast growing. They can grow at 18 inches a year on average, and some have been known to grow as much as 36 inches a year. So again, think about that. That's up to 3 feet in a year. That's really rapid growth. And they obviously are one of the first trees to grow after a fire or a natural disaster. So black cherry really is considered a pioneer species. And unfortunately, they are susceptible to the eastern tent caterpillar, a common defoliated insect. And they're also susceptible to black knot fungus, though the latter seldom causes the black cherries to die. They also, though, have a shallow root system, and that makes them vulnerable to being blown down in severe windstorms. Well, black cherry is a pioneer species. It's one of the first trees to grow in an open or disturbed area after an event like a fire or logging or a natural disaster. And it thrives in full sunlight and helps establish that structure to the early forest, paving the way for other longer-lived species to move in. So that hence the term pioneer species. And as I mentioned, they're relatively fast growing, averaging 18 inches of growth per year, when again, some as much as 36 inches of growth per year, not being uncommon. So they can quickly colonize areas that have otherwise little competition. So the value of the black cherry trees are highly valued for their wood. As I mentioned, they have hard reddish wood that's used for furniture, paneling, veneers, handles, interior trim, professional and scientific instruments, and even some toys. The wood has relatively few knots, it has a smooth grain, and it finishes beautifully. The fruit, the cherries, are not sweet. They're actually rather bitter, but the fruit can be made into jellies, pies, and jams. And it's also used to flavor beverages like wine, soda, and some liquors. Humans can eat the black cherries, but you should never eat the pits. The pits actually contain glycosides that can convert it to cyanide, which is a dangerous poison. And the cherries are rich in antioxidants, which may have some health benefits. And the inner bark has been used to create cough syrups and remedies for coughs, colds, and sore throats. But the biggest value of the black cherry is for the wildlife. Fallen cherries are an important food source for animals like red foxes, chipmunks, cottontails, white-footed mice, gray and red squirrels. Bears and raccoons even climb up into the black cherry trees to get the fruits. During winters, voles will feed on the bark down at the snow level, and white-tailed deer and moose will browse on the twigs. And many insects use black cherry as a source for food, particularly the leaves. And the nectar and pollen of the flowers is a powerful attractant for bees. And the black cherry trees provide food for more than 300 species of butterfly and moth caterpillars. Some 70 species of birds feed on the black cherry fruits, and black cherries are also an important food source for wild turkeys and ruffed grouse in both summer and fall. And birds may actually become intoxicated by slightly fermented cherries and fly into your windows. The fruit and the seeds may release cyanide that's toxic to ruminant livestock. More on that later on. So again, Doug Tallamy, whose work we often cite, actually ranks black cherry trees and other species of the genus Prunus as his second highest rated food source. So again, oaks are first, but black cherries are surprisingly second. And black cherries serve as a host for a variety of caterpillars and moths, caterpillars of moths and butterflies. And as we mentioned, the fragrant flowers provide pollen and nectar for honeybees and many other native pollinators. And many species of birds also relish the black cherries, and they then dispense the seeds, which helps other black cherries grow. And the fruits, though they are bitter, are readily gobbled up by many animals. We mentioned before squirrels, chipmunks, opossums, raccoons, even black bears. And we mentioned that white-tailed deer and other wild animals like moose will browse on black cherry trees. And some bats may actually roost under the bark of black cherries. Remember, we said the bark is very scaly, so if it uplifts a little bit, you can actually fit a bat underneath there. I mentioned before danger to livestock. All parts of black cherry, including the seeds, the leaves, the inner bark, have glycosides that can be converted into the poison cyanide. And they usually don't actually contain free cyanide, but under the right conditions, like when the tree is damaged or the leaves have begun to wilt, those glycosides get converted to cyanide. So livestock that eat those parts of such a black cherry tree can actually die. So you want to keep your black cherry trees away from livestock. And interestingly, even though they're very toxic to the livestock, most wild mammals like deer seem to eat those parts without any problem. And digestion can also lead to conversion to cyanide. And that's why you should never eat the seeds of black cherry trees. So again, black cherries are a haven for caterpillars. Over 340 species of caterpillars feed on black cherry leaves. And this is second again only to oak trees. And by fall, you're likely to see many holes in the leaves of the black cherry tree. And that's because the caterpillars have been actively feeding on those leaves. And once again, those caterpillars become an important part of the food chain. Remember, caterpillars are extremely important for feeding fledgling birds, and that's because they're soft and they have lots of protein and fat. So caterpillars are an important part of the food chain. And the black cherry blossoms that we mentioned are very fragrant and they attract bees and other pollinators. And they provide pollen and nectar for those pollinators. So there you have it. The black cherry trees are beautiful. They're valued for their wood. They're valued for their fruit. And they're valued as a food for a whole host of wildlife species. and they're also valued for pollination. So everybody ought to have a black cherry tree. Just remember not to eat the pits. So that's black cherries. I hope you've enjoyed this, and go out there and get yourself a black cherry tree.